Katimiîn and Ameekyáaraam Sacred Lands Act, introduced by Representative Jared Huffman of California, and I will look forward to listening to the correct pronunciation of that. H.R. 6964 to authorize leases of up to 99 years for lands held in trust for the Confederated Tribes of the Chehalis Reservation, introduced by Representative Marilyn Strickland of Washington. The discussion draft of the ANS to H.R. 7581, York Lands Act of 2022, also introduced by Representative Jared Huffman of California. The H.R. 8115, Recreation and Public Purposes Tribal Parity Act, introduced by Representative Doug LaMalfa of California, and H.R. 8286 to take certain federal land and state of Washington into trust for the Lower Elwha Klalam Tribe and for other purposes, introduced by Representative Derek Kilmer of Washington. And so that we're not all on the West Coast, we have H.R. 8380, the Prairie Band Potawatomi Nation Shabana Band Reservation Settlement Act of 2022, introduced by Representative Jesus Chuy Garcia of Illinois, and H.R. 8387, Parity for Tribal Law Enforcement Act, introduced by Representative Dan Newhouse of Washington. Under Committee Rule 4F, any oral opening statements at hearings are limited to the chair and the ranking minority member or their designees. This will allow us to hear from our witnesses sooner and help members keep to their schedule. Therefore, I ask unanimous consent that all other members' opening statements be made part of the hearing record if they are submitted to the clerk by 5 p.m. today or the close of the hearing, whichever comes first. Hearing no objection, so ordered. Without objection, the chair may also declare recess subject to the call of the chair. Hearing no objection, so ordered. As described in the notice, statements, documents, and motions must be submitted to the electronic repository at hnrcdocs@mail.house.gov. Members physically present should provide a hard copy for staff to distribute by email. Please note that members are responsible for their own microphones. As with our fully in-person meetings, members can be muted by staff only to avoid inadvertent background noise. Finally, members or witnesses experiencing technical problems should inform committee staff immediately. I will begin by recognizing myself for my opening statement. And once again, I want to thank you. It's wonderful to look out at the hearing room and see all of the interest in the bills that we are hearing today. We have 7 bills on our document that are meant to uplift the economic development, recreational activities, public safety, and ultimately sovereignty of tribal nations. So we're going to go in numerical order. Our first bill is H.R. 6032, Katimiîn and Ameekyáaraam Sacred Lands Act, introduced by our fellow committee member, Representative Jared Huffman from California. The land in H.R. 6032 is traditionally known as the Katimiîn and Ameekyáaraam. These lands are considered ceremonial areas and the sites of former villages. They are known to the Karuk Tribe as the center of the world. Although the tribe continues to use these lands for ceremonies and fish harvesting, access to these sacred sites is not always guaranteed. H.R. 6032 will resolve access issues for the tribe by placing 1,031 acres of land in the Siskiyou and Humboldt counties into trust. The second bill we will hear is H.R. 6964 to authorize leases of up to 99 years for lands held in trust for the Confederated Tribes of the Chehalis Reservation. It was introduced by our colleague, Representative Marilyn Strickland from Washington. This bill will provide authority for the Chehalis Tribe to extend their lease agreements to pursue its planned economic development activities. This will enable the tribe to develop supply chain infrastructure, and we know how important that is. The third bill is H.R. 7581, York Lands Act of 2022, also introduced by Representative Huffman. This bill supports the York Tribe's natural resource-based economy by increasing the tribe's role in federal land management and improving its reservation infrastructure. For our hearing, we'll be discussing the discussion draft ANS, which removes Section 5, 7, 8, and 9 of the introduced legislation. Next up is H.R. 8115, the Recreation and Public Purposes Tribal Parity Act, introduced by our colleague, Representative Doug LaMalfa from California. This bill would amend the Recreation and Public Purposes Act to allow federally recognized tribes to participate in the Act's purchasing and leasing program to expand opportunities for land acquisition. It is an important effort to provide parity for tribes. Next, we have H.R. 8286 to take certain federal land in the state of Washington into trust for the Lower Ameekyáaraam tribe, introduced by our colleague, Representative Derek Kilmer from Washington. This bill would restore lands to the tribe by placing them into trust. This will protect sacred and cultural lands, continue restoration efforts for the ecosystem, and uphold our trust and treaty obligations to the Lower Ameekyáaraam tribe. The sixth bill is H.R. 8380, Prairie Band of Potawatomi Nation Shibane Band Reservation Settlement Act of 2022, introduced by our colleague Representative Chuy Garcia from Illinois. H.R. 8380 will reaffirm the nation's ownership and jurisdiction over the 130 acres of land within the reservation that the nation has reacquired. It will extinguish the nation's title to the remainder of the original Shibane Reservation and confirms ownership and title of the non-Indian individuals and governments occupying the land within this reservation, thereby clearing the title. Further, this bill will establish compensation for the wrongful taking of the 1,151 acres of land and allow the nation to utilize monies to reacquire an additional 1,151 acres of land on or near the reservation. This will not make them whole, but it will do the best that we can. Our last bill is H.R. 8387, the Parity for Tribal Law Enforcement Act, introduced by Representative Dan Newhouse of Washington. H.R. 8387 seeks to alleviate issues retaining and recruiting law enforcement. It would make tribal law enforcement officers acting under a 638 contract or compact eligible for certain federal benefit programs such as for death, retirement, and pension. I look forward to hearing more on all the legislation before us. I will now recognize Ranking Member Obernolte for his opening statement.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I know we have a lengthy hearing today. I will keep my comments brief. We're hearing a number of really exciting bills that will make lives better for our tribes and the millions of Americans in Indian country. So I'm very happy to be part of the hearing today. I will do my best with the pronunciations. I'm surely not going to be as graceful as the chair in that respect. So our first bill, H.R. 6032, would place about 1,000 acres of culturally significant federal land in Siskiyou and Humboldt counties in my home state of California into trust for the Karuk Tribe. The second bill, H.R. 6964, would amend current law to authorize the Confederated Tribes of the Chehalis Reservation to lease its trust land for a period of up to 99 years. Under the Long-Term Leasing Act, most tribes can only lease their lands in trust for a period of 50 years. However, it's important to note Congress has amended the Long-Term Leasing Act over 50 times to permit tribes greater leasing authority, and in this case, there are some pretty compelling arguments that a longer lease term is warranted. Third, the draft ANS to H.R. 7581 would place approximately 1,200 acres of U.S. Forest Service land in the Yurok Experimental Forest and Six Rivers National Forest into trust for the Yurok tribe to be managed for conservation and research purposes. I understand that there was substantial opposition from other tribes to the original draft of the bill, and I'm very happy to learn that opposition has been removed in the ANS. I know I can probably speak for everyone on this dais how frustrating it is to us sometimes that the greatest opposition to bills intended to improve lives for people in Indian country comes from other tribes, and so I'm very happy that in this case compromise was reached. Fourth, H.R. 8115 would amend current law to add Indian tribes to the list of entities eligible to lease or purchase public lands from the Department of the Interior pursuant to the Recreation and Public Purposes Act. That would continue our policy of recognizing tribal sovereignty and self-determination by adding Indian tribes to the list of eligible entities to purchase or lease federal lands pursuant to the RNPP. So I'll be looking forward to hearing about that. Fifth bill, H.R. 8286, would place approximately 1,000 acres of NPS land into trust for the Lower Ameekyáaraam tribe. That's a replacement for land lost after the tribe saw its land flooded due to the Elwha and Gilness dams on the Elwha River, so certainly seems like an equitable exchange there. Our sixth bill, H.R. 8380, would settle claims by the Prairie Band Potawatomi Nation relating to the Shibane Band Reservation in northern Illinois and place 130 acres of land into restricted fee status for the tribe. Also, it authorizes $10 million for partial payment to settle this land claim. Now, this legislation, I'm looking forward to the testimony here. It's relatively uncommon to contemplate these kinds of claim settlements due to the finality of the Indian Claims Commission Act on Historic Land Claims prior to 1946. It's going to be interesting to see how this works out. I'm a little cautious about this, but I'd like to hear from the tribe about that. I'd also like to hear about the arguments about these land claims so far from the tribal reservation. We'll have that discussion when the bill is brought up. And lastly, H.R. 8387 would authorize tribal law enforcement officers acting under contracts or compacts to be considered federal enforcement officers in enforcing federal law, which I think is a concept that everyone on this panel supports. So I thank the witnesses for being here. Looking forward to the testimony. And Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Ranking Member Obernolte, for those comments. I will now ask unanimous consent that Representative Jared Huffman of California have permission to sit on the dais and participate in the hearing. Hearing no objection, so ordered. Now I would like to give the sponsoring members of Congress the opportunity to speak on behalf of their legislation. The chair will now recognize the gentleperson from Illinois, Mr. Garcia, for a statement on your legislation.